Welcome to Vision Plus and welcome back to this senior for mathematics and complex numbers. We are now on example 5 under division of complex numbers, and this will mark our last example on division. Yes, we understand that this list is not exhaustive, but please try out questions, and where you find difficulties, do not hesitate to reach out to us or ask a question in the comment box. So, example 5 is still given us 3 complex numbers, but your exam could give you more than that or less than that. Always adhere to what the question says. Z1, Z2, and Z3, and part A is saying that we need to find Z1 divided by Z3. So what do we do here? Simply substitute. What is Z1? That is negative 2 minus 3i divided by Z3. Z3 is simply I. Now, I told you before that if you have only I on the denominator, the choice is yours. One, you could get the conjugate of the denominator, and then you multiply the numerator and the denominator by that conjugate, or simply you go straight and multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. Let's do both and you see that the answers are always the same. So beginning with conjugate, remember conjugate, we simply change the sign. So this I is positive, so we need to make it negative I. That is the conjugate. And then going on now to multiplication, we shall say the numerator is negative 2 minus 3i, but we are multiplying it by the conjugate of the denominator, which is negative I. Divide by the denominator, which is I, times its conjugate, which is negative I. Are you saying that this negative and this negative can give us positive, which is the same as multiplying both the numerator and the denominator by the denominator straight away? We shall see that when we go to the other method 2. Negative 2 times negative I gives us positive 2i. This one is done. Negative 3i times negative I gives us positive 3i squared over negative I times negative I is negative I squared. And then we continue. I'll have here now Z1 out of Z3 equals to 2i plus 3 plus 3i squared, 2i plus 3. But what is I squared is negative 1 over negative. Remember that negative was already there, negative I squared. But what is I squared? I squared is negative 1. This negative has been existing, but I squared alone has negative 1. It is negative 1. So to look in that format, that way, where I squared here is negative 1. So proceed here. This gives us here 2i. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Out of negative times negative 1, there is an imaginary negative 1 here. There is an imaginary 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Now, any number divided by 1 is that number. Or you could start by distributing 2i out of 1 minus 3 out of 1. What is 2i divided by 1? Simply 2i. What is 3 divided by 1? Is simply 3. This is the answer. But for the part of NB, if you have seen that the denominator is only I, there's no real part, then this answer, this solution could be done in this format. What is Z1? Negative 2 minus 3i out of Z3, which is I. So we would simply multiply the numerator by I and the denominator by I. This gives us negative 2 times I is negative 2i. Negative 3 times I is negative 3i over I times I is I squared. and then we proceed here. This here would give us negative 3i times I is negative 3i squared. It should be a square there, and the rest are okay. Then here we shall have negative 2i minus 3 times I squared, which is negative 1, out of this I squared is itself is negative 1. I squared equals to negative 1. So instead of I squared, we put negative 1. And on going on here, we shall have negative 2i plus 3 out of negative 1. Then we distribute it. We shall have negative 2i out of negative 1 minus 3 plus 3 out of negative 1. Then on dividing, negative 2i divided by negative 1, it becomes positive 2i. Positive 3 divided by negative 1 becomes negative 3. And you find that the answers are the same, as long as you manage your signs well and you adhere to the laws of multiplication and the property of I squared equals to negative. Part B says inverse of Z3. Inverse of Z3. And remember, from the laws of indices, if we have a power n, it is the same as 1 out of a power negative n. And if you have a power negative n, it is the same as 1 out of a power n. If you are getting the reciprocal of the number, you simply change the sign of its power. Here it was positive, it has become negative. Here it was negative, it has become positive. And in the same sense, if we say if n is negative 1, actually let me say if n is 1. If n is 1, then this first one becomes a power n, which is 1. It becomes 1 out of a power negative 1. And the second one becomes a power negative 1, becomes 1 out of a power 1, which is the same as 1 out of a. So in the same manner, Z3 inverse, this is its power, it has power negative 1. It is just the same as 1 out of Z3 power 1, which is the same as 1 out of Z3. This Z3, it is just giving us, it is just the identification of the complex number. This is the third complex number on our list. Do not focus on it. It just tells you that this is a complex number we are calling Z3. Now, since you have this, it means now that part B, which is Z3 or negative 1, is the same as 1 out of Z3. Then we need to substitute. What is Z3? Z3 is simply I. So here we have 1 out of I. This is not the answer. Why? Because I is appearing on the denominator, and which we do not want. So since I has no real part, it is only the imaginary part, 1, we could get the conjugate. Let me just send it at 1. We get the conjugate of the denominator, which is negative I. So now we shall have here now Z3 or negative 1 equals to 1 out of I. But we are multiplying both the numerator and the denominator by the inverse, which is negative I, also down here by negative I. 1 times negative I is negative I. 1 I times negative I is negative I squared. And we simplify. Here we shall have negative I out of negative. What is I squared is negative 1. I squared is negative 1. This negative has already been existing there. So this means that here we shall have negative I out of 1, the same as negative I. This is the answer. Or method 2. Since we only have I on the denominator, we will simply multiply both the numerator and the denominator by I. So, shall just say Z3 inverse becomes 1 out of I, then here times I, also down here times I, equals to 1 times I is I, out of I times I is I squared. But what is I squared is negative 1. So here we shall have I out of I squared is negative 1. Simply from I squared equals to negative 1. So here we shall have I out of negative 1. What is I divided by negative 1? Is negative I. This gives us negative I. So you have seen that whether you get the conjugate or not, as long as the denominator does not have a real part, you get the same answers. When you get the conjugate, or you simply multiply by the denominator. And then finally, I'm going to part C, which is Z2 divided by Z1. Let's see, Z2 divided by Z1. We substitute. What is Z2? Z2 is 5 minus 2i divided by Z1 is negative 2 minus 3i. If you look at the denominator, it has I. So we need to get rid of I. And the only way we can do that is to multiply by the conjugate. Why are we multiplying by the conjugate? Because there are two terms and I is appearing. So get the conjugate of the denominator. Conjugate of the denominator. We want to change the sign of the imaginary part. So here we shall have negative 2 plus 3i. After that, then we shall multiply both the numerator and the denominator by this conjugate. So the numerator is 5 minus 2i times the conjugate, which is 2 plus 3i over the denominator is negative 2 minus 3i times the conjugate, which is negative 2 plus 3i. And the next thing is just multiplication. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. 5 times 3i is 15i. Negative 2i times negative 2 gives us positive 4i. Negative 2i times negative 2i times 3i is negative 6i squared. Then we go to the denominator over negative 2 times negative 2, that is 4. Negative 2 times 3i, negative 6i. Negative 3i times negative 2, positive 6i. Negative 3i times 3i is negative 9i squared. Then we go on, so Z2 out of Z1 equals to, we now simplify. We have negative 10. We have 15i plus 4i. 15i plus 4i is positive 19i. And then minus 6i squared. So minus 6, what is I squared is negative 1. And then over this and this are cancelling out because negative 6 plus 6 is 0. So we shall have 4 minus 9i squared. We'll have 4 minus 9. But what is I squared is negative 1. Simply I squared is negative 1. Then we proceed here. We shall have here negative 10 plus 19i plus 6. Negative 6 times negative 1 is positive 6 over 4. Negative 9 times negative 1 is positive 9. And then we have here negative 10 plus 6. Negative 10 plus 6, those are the like terms, plus 19i out of 13. This gives us a negative 4 plus 19i out of 13. Then we distribute the denominator. This gives us negative 4 out of 13 plus 19i out of 13. And this is the answer. And we have come to the end of division of complex numbers. So please, if you have questions that are challenging, send them in the comment section and we shall be able to answer them. Up next, we shall be looking at magnitude of a complex number, and then we go on to look at the Argand diagram, as well as the polar form of a complex number and the exponential form of a complex number. So please stay with us so that you learn.